Chris Lee and Blayne Gilmer of Southeastern 14 here to preview the Orange Bowl between the Georgia Bulldogs of the Southeastern Conference. Florida State, as of Thursday night, is in the ACC. By the time you see it, they may be in the SEC. We don't know. That's the world we live in these days. And you look at computers, what they say. You've got team rankings. Has got Georgia a 3-point favorite. FPI has got Georgia a 5-point favorite. Sagarin and SP Plus have Georgia a 6-point favorite. But guess what, Blayne? The odds makers have Georgia as a 14.5-point favorite. For reasons you can guess. No Jordan Travis, and of course, tons of bowl opt-outs and transfer portal guys. And Merry Christmas. It's bowl season. It's a mess. And it looks nothing like what you watched during the season.
Yeah, and it's been more like Festivus for Florida State because they've had the airing of the grievances for the last couple of weeks here. So when you talk about the Seminoles, this is really the Georgia Bulldogs versus the the ghost of Seminoles past, to keep with the Christmas theme here, because these Seminoles look nothing like they did a couple of weeks ago. So many guys that are taking their option to get ready for the NFL. A lot of guys have hit the transfer portal, and I think Florida State actually has more guys that have hit the transfer portal that are key members of their team than Georgia does, and that's why you see our friends at BetOnline having it as a 14.5-point spread, Chris.
As you mentioned, this preview presented by BetOnline. All the major sports are in action this week with the college football playoff ready to kick off. BetOnline is your #1 destination for all your sports wagering information, including news for pro football, the NBA, upcoming fights, and NHL games this season. Head to the website today to get in on the action. See all the updated odds for the week. Remember to use the promo code BELIEVE. That's BLEAV. Get your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, where the game starts. Blayne, where do we even start with opt-outs, draft declared guys? Obviously, Jordan Travis, that injury, horrible. You hated to see that for Florida State, kept him out of the playoff. But my goodness, both these teams have got multiple key guys declared for the draft and sitting out. They've got guys who've hit the portal. Let's start with Florida State. Who are the guys that are going to be out that will make a difference?
Well, the NFL opt-outs are Jaheim Bell, who transferred in from South Carolina, of course, had a good year for Florida State, starting tight end. Their running back, Trey Benson, he had a great year. He's out. Fabian Lovett, a defensive lineman, he's out. Johnny Wilson and Cam Coleman, your top 2 receivers, both out. Jared Verse, defensive end, probably a first-round pick, he's out. So just those guys alone are enough to add 7 points to a spread. And then you take into a guy who's a key cog that has been played a bigger role at sometimes than others, with DJ Lundy hitting the portal. A couple backup running backs are out of there, so that hurts your running back depth, and that's important in these bowl games and stuff like that, as you know. And then a couple of tight ends that are out. So there's just a big list of guys who are out for Florida State. Georgia has lost a lot of depth pieces. Really, the only 2 pieces that they've lost that were key players on their team, and one probably wouldn't have played anyways, Jamon Dumas-Johnson. He had that fractured forearm. He has left, and he is committed to Kentucky along with Brock Vandagriff, their backup quarterback. So if God forbid something did happen to Carson Beck in this game, it wouldn't be Brock Vandagriff coming in as the number 2 quarterback anymore. It would be Gunnar Stockton. So that is just something to watch out for. And then, of course, Marvin Jones, who, oddly enough, Chris, transferred to Florida State. He's a Florida State legacy. Georgia beat out Florida State for him in his recruitment. He spent a couple years at Georgia. Now he's going to Tallahassee. So a lot of movement, a lot of intertwining parts. And like you said, we're recording this on Thursday, December 21st. Guess as we record this tomorrow, Florida State's having an emergency Board of Regents meeting. So who knows? They may end up starting the ball in motion where this could be a conference matchup before too long. So it is a crazy world of college football, and this game has a lot of storylines and a lot of interesting turn of events going on in it, Chris.
Let's talk about when Georgia's got the ball. The Bulldogs averaged 38.4 points this year. Florida State gave up 15.9, but, some of the key guys, including Verse, gone. Georgia averaged 7.1 yards per snap. Florida State gave up 4.7 on rushing plays, and then passing plays. Georgia got 5.4 and then 8.9. Florida State giving up 5.0, just 4.4 yards per passing play. That is elite. That's one of the best numbers in the country. Turnover rates, Florida State forcing them 2% of the time. Georgia giving up just 1.6% of turnovers on offensive snaps. Florida State a little bit more vulnerable towards the run. I felt like Georgia did that better towards the end of the year, though it didn't really translate against Alabama. But with Verse out, I would think that is, I don't know, probably an easier path rather than throwing on Florida State with the success rate that it had this year.
Yeah, I think that's a thing to look at there. But when you have the pass rush of Jared Verse not there, Carson Beck and that offensive line, other than just a couple of times this year, for the most time, that offensive line really protected Carson Beck. So you got to wonder, where's the pass rush going to come from if you are Florida State? But you have a point there. It is a little bit easier to run the football against them. There was a couple of times this year, Virginia Tech had 209 yards rushing against Florida State, and then in the Miami, North Alabama, and Florida games back to back, they gave up over 100 yards rushing, 131, 143, 146, but they only gave up 77 yards rushing in an impressive win over, in my opinion, an impressive defensive performance over Louisville in the ACC championship game. So it's really going to come down to motivation on that side of the ball for Florida State. Can they rally, especially sometimes, Chris, when you have a side of the ball that is going to struggle, that offensive side would just void a ton of playmakers over there, don't have your quarterback. Sometimes the defense and the special teams really rally around, and that's kind of a circle the wagons moment and really get things going there for you. So we'll see. It could go either way in terms of that and motivation, things of that nature. But you got to think Georgia is pretty excited to see what Carson Beck is going to do in this game, given that he has announced that he's coming back for another year, one of the biggest announcements of the entire offseason. And, Kendall Milton and Dejan Edwards, who may be wrapping up their careers at Georgia running the football, are going to want to do some good things. Don't know if Brock Bowers or Ladd McConkey will play in this game. That'll be a big thing to see. They haven't announced yet. I'm sure after Christmas we'll learn more a little bit about that once these guys return. But just having Carson Beck back and having some of those receivers that are looking forward to using this as a launch point for big years next year, like Dominic Lovett and Ra Thomas, guys who transferred in this year at Georgia, kind of got their feet wet, and now they're going to have a bigger role in the next season. I think that they're, Oscar Delp, a lot of these guys are really looking forward to this moment, and we'll see how Georgia's offense is able to click. I think Georgia has much more pieces intact on that offensive side than Florida State has on the defensive side, given some of the transfers and the opt-outs.
Florida State averaged 37 points a game. Of course, a lot of that came with Jordan Travis and Johnny Wilson. Georgia giving up 16.6 a game. Per snap, Florida State's offense, 6.4 yards a snap. Georgia giving up 4.8. On rushing and then passing plays, those numbers for Georgia numbers are 4.7 and 4.9. Florida State, they are 5.4 and 7.4. Now, here's one thing Florida State was exceptional at. In fact, maybe the best in the country. Did not turn it over. 0.6% of snaps. Georgia forced turnovers on 1.6% of snaps. But, again, it just looked so much different for the Seminoles when Jordan Travis, who's one of the best players in the country, was not in there, which was the case the last couple of games.
Yeah, and I think when it comes down to it, you really need, whether it's Tate Rodemaker or whether it's Brock Glenn. We'll see which one ends up taking the snaps for Florida State. Maybe both of them do to a certain point. I know Brock Glenn's a guy who has some mobility about him, and that is something that gave this Georgia defense issues this year, Chris, is a mobile quarterback. So if you're looking for something that you can do, can you get a quarterback run game involved a little bit? Of course, if you're Florida State, you're without your leading rusher of Trey Benson. So, you're looking for somebody to step up behind him. Rodney Hill was the third leading rusher. He's out in the transfer portal. Jordan Travis was the fourth leading rusher. So Lawrence Toafil, he was had 69 attempts, 463 yards for 4 touchdowns. So maybe he steps up. But like I said, your top 2 receivers, Keon Coleman and Johnny Wilson, both out. Actually, top 3 with Jaheim Bell being out as well. So, it's just tough. Where is the production going to come from? You've got some guys on Georgia's side that are, as we mentioned in our Missouri and Ohio State preview, there's some guys that have the opportunity they know they're going to play on Sundays. This is another opportunity to show some film and really help their draft stock out one last time in a big stage game, such as the Orange Bowl, whether that's Kamari Lassiter. I also want to see the matchup of those young linebackers that had to step up when Jamon Dumas-Johnson went out with that injury. CJ Allen and Raylan Wilson, they had some growing pains. They gave up some stuff against Alabama. How much have they learned? How much have they grown from those mistakes from the SEC championship game to this Orange Bowl? I think that's something to watch out for here. And then I think you're going to get to see some younger players play on that defensive front for Georgia. I think you're going to get to see some guys like Samuel Mpemba, like Damon Wilson, a lot of these younger guys that were 5-star caliber athletes. I think they're going to get a chance to show up and play, specifically with Marvin Jones Jr. being gone to the transfer portal now. So a lot of youth movement and a lot of how much have you grown, and then some veterans that get to show off some last minute stuff for the NFL. But Florida State, can you find some playmakers on your side? And they're going to have to grow up in a hurry.
Yeah, both teams definitely wanted to be in the playoff. I think both teams heading into the last week of championship season thought they'd be there. We know how that turned out. Look, Florida State just got the guts ripped out of its team in every way imaginable with the portal and with the draft. Georgia did lose some top-end talent, but it's been more of a team for the last 3 or 4 years that it just gets it done on depth, defense. 10 guys catching the ball every game seems like 4 or 5 guys getting rushing attempts. Georgia just seems a lot more suited to win this kind of game in light of what's left after the roster attrition, and that is why I'm going with the Bulldogs.
Yeah, I think Georgia wins. I think Georgia looks good doing it. I think it's going to be a lot of young players that are kind of learning on the fly for Florida State and nowhere near the same team. And as this shouldn't be viewed, in my opinion, as a reflection of what this Florida State team was this year, because this is really kind of just a glimpse at spring practice, so to speak, for Florida State in the next year. So I think Georgia wins and wins big, and kind of uses it as a springboard themselves for 2024.
He is Blayne Gilmer. I am Chris Lee. This has been our Orange Bowl preview presented by our friends at BetOnline.